The winter of 1952 did not arrive gently in Harlem. It came sharp like a reprimand. The wind carved through Lenox Avenue as though it carried memory in its teeth. And on nights like that, even the street lamps seemed to dim in quiet resignation. Inside the Apollo district, music still lived. Laughter still rose from supper clubs. But beneath it all, there was something unspoken, something tightening. Marcus Ellington felt it before anyone said it aloud. He was not a famous man, not a wealthy man, not a feared man. He was something rarer. He was steady, 42 years old, Navy veteran, mechanic by trade, a man who ironed his shirts even when no one was coming over, a man who tipped the shoeshine boy the same weather. Business was good or thin. A man who believed that dignity was not loud, it was consistent. And for 17 years, he had worked at Hollis & Green Automotive, a repair shop just beyond the edge of Midtown, technically Manhattan, but spiritually divided. The sign above the door had never included his name, though more than half the customers requested him, specifically. Then came the new manager. Richard Calder did not shout. He smiled. That was worse. On a Tuesday afternoon, Marcus was called into the office. The walls were newly painted, the desk replaced. The air colder somehow. Calder folded his hands. We're restructuring. Restructuring. A word that sounded clean. Efficient. Neutral. But in 1952, in certain rooms, it meant something else entirely. Marcus listened without interrupting. Calder spoke about image, about modern clientele, about needing a different kind of presence on the shop floor. The word never spoken hung between them, like smoke. Marcus understood. I see, he said quietly. Calder slid an envelope across the desk. Severance. 2 weeks' pay. No incident. No complaint. No public scandal. Just disappearance. Outside, the wind pressed harder against the brick. Marcus walked home that evening, slower than usual. He did not stop at the bar, did not complain, did not allow anger to stain his posture. When he reached his brownstone, he removed his coat carefully, hung it in its place, and sat at the kitchen table. His wife Evelyn knew before he spoke. She had eyes trained by years of reading silence. They let you go. He nodded once. Evelyn did not curse, did not cry. She reached across the table and placed her hand over his. They closed one door, she said softly. That doesn't mean you stop knocking. But the truth was heavier than hope. Work was scarce. Loans were denied quietly. Banks found reasons. Insurance companies found conditions. Landlords found clauses. And men like Calder found ways to protect image. Weeks passed, then months. Savings thinned. Marcus began taking small repair jobs out of their garage. Oil changes, brake pads, carburetors cleaned by hand. Word spread slowly, not through advertisements, but through trust. He charged less than competitors, not because he undervalued himself, but because he valued access. A nurse who needed her car to reach the hospital. A taxi driver trying to feed 3 children. A schoolteacher whose paycheck barely covered rent. You pay what you can, he would say. Sometimes what they could pay was very little. Evelyn worried, but she never doubted him. One evening, after closing the garage door, Marcus noticed a boy standing near the sidewalk, thin coat, torn gloves, watching. You need something? Marcus asked. The boy hesitated. You fixed my mama's car last week. Marcus nodded. She said you didn't charge her what it cost. Marcus shrugged. She needed it more than I did. The boy stepped forward. I want to learn. There. It was not money, not sympathy, legacy. Marcus handed him a wrench. What's your name? Samuel. All right, Samuel. First lesson, we fix things the right way, even when nobody's watching. That winter, the garage became something else, a place where boys learned discipline, where men found temporary dignity when the world stripped it from them elsewhere, where no one was turned away because of what they lacked, and quietly, without announcement, the community began protecting Marcus the way he had protected them. When a local grocer couldn't pay, he sent food instead. When the landlord hinted at raising rent unfairly, 5 customers arrived the next morning, just to talk. When the city inspector showed up unexpectedly, he found everything in order. Respect spreads differently than fear. It roots deeper. Then came the turning point. One afternoon, a black Cadillac pulled up outside the garage, polished, intimidating, familiar. Richard Calder stepped out. He did not smile this time. He surveyed the modest operation, the handwritten sign, the line of waiting cars. "I've been hearing things," Calder said. Marcus wiped his hands slowly with a cloth. "Good things, I hope." Calder's jaw tightened. "You're undercutting licensed shops." "I'm fixing cars." "You're not certified to run a business at this scale." Marcus met his eyes evenly. "For 17 years I was certified enough to fix yours." Silence. Calder stepped closer. "You're violating city code." Now the boys in the garage had stopped moving. Samuel stood very still. Marcus folded the cloth. "If I am," he said calmly, "you're welcome to file whatever paperwork you believe is necessary." There was no sarcasm, no anger. Just steadiness. Calder looked around again. But this time he didn't just see cars. He saw loyalty. He saw men watching. He saw something he could not control. "You could come back," Calder said suddenly. "We've reconsidered on probation." There it was. Not apology. Control. Marcus considered him for a long moment. The old Marcus, the one who needed steady pay, might have accepted. But something had changed in that cold office months earlier. "No," Marcus said quietly. Calder blinked. "No, I don't want my position back." Wind moved through the open garage door. Marcus stepped forward slightly, lowering his voice. "You let me go because you thought I didn't fit your image." He gestured gently toward the waiting cars. "This is my image." No anger. No threat. Just truth. Calder left without another word. That spring, the garage officially became Ellington Auto Repair. The paperwork was approved after a surprising number of letters reached City Hall. Handwritten letters from teachers, nurses, delivery drivers, even a pastor. Samuel became his apprentice full-time, and on opening day, Marcus wore the same pressed shirt he had worn the day he was fired. Not out of nostalgia, but as a reminder. The doors had closed once, and he had built his own. That night, after locking up, Marcus stood alone in the garage. He ran his hand over the new sign. Evelyn stepped beside him. "You didn't just build a shop," she said. He smiled faintly. "No," he agreed. He looked down the street, where headlights flickered and children laughed. "We built something they can stand inside." The wind was softer now, not because winter had changed, but because resilience had died. By the summer of 1954, Ellington Auto Repair was no longer that little garage. It was a presence, not loud, not flashy, but steady, the kind of steady that unsettles men who rely on instability to stay powerful. The shop had expanded into the neighboring unit. 3 lifts instead of 1. A modest waiting area with coffee brewed strong and always free. Samuel, now taller and broader in the shoulders, moved with confidence under Marcus's watchful eye. 2 more young apprentices had joined, both boys who once stood outside watching, unsure if they belonged inside anything that resembled opportunity. But success in Harlem did not move unnoticed. Especially not by those who once controlled the narrative. Across Midtown, Hollis and Green had begun losing clients. Not because Marcus advertised, not because he slandered, simply because people talked. "Go to Ellington. He'll treat you right." That sentence spread faster than any newspaper could print, and Richard Calder, now a partner at the firm, was not a man who tolerated loss quietly. One afternoon, a city vehicle parked outside Ellington Auto Repair. 2 Inspectors stepped out. CLIPBOARDS.badges.expressions. Trained to appear neutral, Marcus greeted them with calm courtesy. Afternoon. Gentlemen. What can we do for you? Routine compliance inspection. One replied. There's no such thing as routine when it arrives unannounced. They comb through everything. Licenses, zoning papers, tax receipts, safety measures, ventilation systems, waste disposal documentation. Marcus had prepared for this possibility long ago. Every document was filed. Every requirement met. Every rule followed meticulously. Because he understood something early. When the system wants you gone, it will not come for your temper. It will come for your paperwork. 3 hours later, the inspectors left. No citations, but the message was clear. Someone had noticed. That evening, Marcus stayed late. He wasn't afraid, but he was thinking. Evelyn found him in the garage long after dark. You're quiet tonight, she said gently. He leaned against the workbench, wiping his hands. They've shifted tactics, he replied. You expected it. Yes. Are we in trouble? Marcus paused. No, he said calmly. But we're entering a different game. And he was right, because the next move did not come from the city. It came from the banks, the small business. Line of credit Marcus had carefully built over 2 years was suddenly under review. Payment processing delays began occurring. Part supplier abruptly canceled their agreement, citing corporate restructuring. Coincidences rarely arrive in clusters. Samuel noticed first. They're squeezing us, he muttered one afternoon after another delayed shipment. Marcus looked at him steadily. Then we don't panic. But if they cut supply, we can't. Fill orders. Marcus nodded once, so we adapt. That night, instead of closing at 6, Marcus walked 3 blocks over to a struggling parts distributor owned by an older Jewish mechanic named Aaron Weiss. Aaron's shop had been bypassed by larger corporations years ago. He survived on scraps of demand. Marcus entered quietly. I hear you've got inventory nobody's buying. Aaron squinted. Depends who's asking. I'm asking. They talked for 2 hours. About discrimination. About survival. About what it means to be edged out by bigger forces who prefer uniform faces and quiet obedience. By midnight, they shook hands. A private supply line was born, not because it was convenient, because it was mutual survival. Within weeks, Ellington Auto Repair was operating independently of the very channels meant to choke it. And that independence, that quiet defiance, became dangerous. Then came the public blow. Iowa public blow. A local newspaper printed a small but pointed article questioning unregulated repair operations spreading through Harlem. It never named Marcus directly. It didn't need to. The implication was clear. Unsafe, improper, risky. Customers began arriving with folded newspapers in hand. Samuel was furious. They're calling you reckless. Marcus read the article fully. Then folded it neatly. Truth doesn't shout, he said quietly. It waits. But waiting became harder when an accident occurred. A young nurse named Clara, one of Marcus's regular customers, was involved in a minor collision. No one was hurt. But the other driver's insurance company quickly claimed faulty brake installation, and Clara's last brake service had been at Ellington Auto Repair. The accusation spread fast. Calder saw opportunity. A formal complaint was filed with the city. Now it wasn't about paperwork. It was about reputation. The hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks later. If found negligent, Marcus could lose everything. That night, the garage was silent. The apprentices had gone home. Samuel remained. You know you did it right, Samuel insisted. I know, Marcus replied calmly. But they don't care about that. Marcus looked at him. That's where you're wrong. Samuel blinked. They care very much about that, Marcus continued. Because if they can prove we're careless, they don't have to admit we're capable. The day of the hearing arrived heavy with humidity. The room was packed. Business owners. Community members. Even Aaron Weiss sat in the back row. Richard Calder was present as well, not openly involved, but observant. The city official read the complaint. Clara was called forward. She stood trembling slightly. Miss Williams, the official began, did you have your brakes serviced at Ellington Auto Repair prior to the accident? Yes. And were you aware of any mechanical issue? No. And did the police report indicate brake failure? She swallowed. It said, possible delay in stopping. Murmurs filled the room. Marcus remained still. Then the official turned to him. Mr. Ellington, do you have a statement? He stood slowly. No notes. No lawyer. Just presence. Yes, he said. He walked toward the center calmly. We serviced Ms. Williams' vehicle 3 weeks before the incident. Full inspection. New brake pads. System tested twice. He paused. I also drove the vehicle myself after installation. He reached into his folder and presented signed inspection logs, torque specifications, and signed test drive confirmations. Meticulous. Precise. Prepared. Then he did something unexpected. Ms. Williams, he said gently, turning toward Clara. When you approached the intersection, were you driving during a rainstorm? She nodded. Double quotes. Yes. And had the road been recently resurfaced? Yes. And the other vehicle, did it attempt a sudden left turn? She hesitated. Yes. Marcus turned back to the panel. Brake systems are mechanical, but physics is environmental. Wet asphalt extends stopping distance. Sudden obstruction eliminates reaction time. He paused again. We did our work properly, but we cannot control the road. Silence. Then Clara spoke. They're right, she said suddenly, voice steadier now. The other driver ran the turn. My brakes worked. I just couldn't stop fast. Enough. The room shifted. Calder's jaw tightened. The official reviewed the documents. After several tense minutes, the ruling came. No negligence found. Relief washed across the room like oxygen returning. But Marcus did not smile, because this had never been about brakes. It had been about credibility. Afterward, outside City Hall, Clara approached him. I'm sorry, she whispered. You have nothing to apologize for, Marcus replied warmly. You told the truth. She hesitated. They pressured me before the hearing. Marcus's eyes darkened slightly, not with rage, but recognition. Did they threaten you? No, she said. They implied that if I cooperated, my insurance claim would process faster. There it was, not violence, not open hatred. Manipulation. Systemic. Clean. Respectable. Marcus nodded slowly. Thank you for standing firm. That evening, word spread through Harlem faster than the article ever had. He had faced the accusation publicly and remained composed. But Calder had one more move. A week later, an anonymous offer arrived. A buyout. Generous. Substantial. Enough to secure Marcus's retirement comfortably. The condition was simple. Sell the garage. Quietly. No public fuss. No explanation. Marcus stared at the contract for a long time. Evelyn watched him carefully. You're tired, she said softly. He exhaled. Slowly. Yes. You've fought enough battles. He looked toward the garage window where Samuel and the boys were closing up for the night. Have I? He asked quietly, because here was the real test. Not accusation. Not sabotage. Temptation. To step away peacefully. To stop pushing against invisible pressure. To rest. The next morning, Marcus requested a meeting. Calder arrived confident. You've made the smart choice, he said before sitting. Marcus slid the unsigned contract back across the desk. I won't be selling. Calder's expression hardened. You're making this harder than it needs to be. No, Marcus replied calmly. You are. Calder leaned forward. You think you're building something noble, but you're destabilizing structure. Marcus met his gaze evenly. No, he said quietly. I'm expanding it. Silence. Then Marcus delivered the turning point, not loudly, not angrily, just clearly. You fired me because I didn't fit your image. You tried to close me because I didn't fit your system. But the only thing I've done is follow the rules. Better than you expected. He leaned forward slightly. You're not threatened by me breaking the law. You're threatened by me succeeding inside it. Calder had no immediate response, because the accusation was not emotional. It was accurate. Marcus stood. You can compete with me. That's fair. You can improve your service, lower your prices, treat your customers better. He paused at the door. But you don't get to erase me. And with that, he walked out. Months later, Ellington Auto Repair expanded again, not through aggression, through loyalty. Samuel became a certified mechanic. Aaron Weiss's distribution business revived. Clara began volunteering financial literacy. Workshops in the waiting room on Saturdays. The garage had become more than a repair shop. It was infrastructure. And Power had learned something uncomfortable. You cannot silence a man who refuses to shout. You cannot discredit a man who documents everything. And you cannot buy a man who already knows his worth. As autumn arrived, Marcus stood outside the garage at closing time. The boys laughed inside. The lights glowed. Warm. Evelyn stepped beside him. They tried to take it again, she said. He nodded. They'll try again. She smiled faintly. And? He looked down the street, calm, steady. Then we'll keep building. Because success had become a threat, and Marcus Ellington had decided long ago he would not shrink to make others comfortable. By 1956, Ellington Auto Repair was no longer simply a garage. It had become a symbol, and symbols are dangerous. The building on 142nd Street had grown into something unexpected. Not grand, not flashy, but alive. On Saturdays, the front waiting room doubled as a community classroom. Clara taught budgeting and insurance literacy. Samuel led mechanical basics workshops for teenagers who had nowhere else to aim their energy. Aaron Weiss supplied parts at fair rates, often refusing to charge interest on delayed payments. The shop no longer just fixed vehicles. It repaired confidence. And that was precisely the problem. Because when marginalized communities begin building their own infrastructure, financially literate, mechanically skilled, economically interdependent, they become less controllable. And control, for some, was the real currency. The first sign of escalation came quietly. A city zoning notice. Not an inspection this time. Reclassification. The neighborhood was being marked for urban renewal development. That phrase, urban renewal, carried weight in 1950s America. It promised modernization, efficiency, progress, but in neighborhoods like Harlem, it often translated into displacement. Marcus read the notice slowly. The block housing Ellington Auto Repair was marked for acquisition. The city planned to clear several structures for a mixed-use redevelopment corridor. Compensation would be offered. Relocation assistance available. Timeline: 6 months. 6 months. Samuel read it over his shoulder. They can't just take it. They can, Marcus replied calmly, if they call it progress. The next week, city planners held a public forum. Architectural renderings were displayed: sleek buildings, polished sidewalks, bright storefronts with no signs in the windows yet. Marcus stood in the back, listening. The language was polished. Economic revitalization. Increased tax base. Modern retail opportunity. Not once did anyone mention where the existing businesses would go. When the floor opened for questions, Samuel's hand shot up first. What happens to the businesses already here? He asked firmly. A planner adjusted his glasses. Fair market. Compensation will be provided. That wasn't the question. Samuel pressed. Murmurs of agreement spread through the room. The planner shifted slightly. Relocation resources are available. Marcus finally stood. He did not raise his voice. May I ask? He said evenly. What provision is made for businesses that serve this specific community? The planner smiled diplomatically. All businesses are treated equally under redevelopment guidelines. Marcus nodded once. And equality, he said softly, is not the same as fairness. Silence. The room held it, because what he was articulating wasn't anger, it was reality. If Ellington Auto Repair relocated outside Harlem, its clientele would lose access. The apprentices would lose mentorship. The Saturday workshops would disappear. The foundation wasn't brick. It was proximity. After the meeting, several business owners gathered around Marcus. What do we do? Someone asked. Marcus folded the zoning notice carefully. We don't panic, he said. We organize. Over the next weeks, something powerful began forming. Petitions were drafted, not emotional pleas, but documented impact statements, financial. Records were compiled showing how many families depended on the garage. Clara assembled statistics on economic recirculation within the neighborhood. Aaron contributed supplier, dependency data. They weren't arguing sentiment. They were presenting structure, but opposition escalated faster. One night, Samuel arrived early and found the garage doors forced open, not destroyed, not vandalized. Just tampered. Files missing. Specifically, the property deed and renovation permits. Marcus arrived minutes later. He surveyed the scene without visible alarm. They're not trying to scare us, Samuel said, fists clenched. They're trying to weaken us. Marcus nodded once. Then we strengthened documentation. By noon, certified copies of all records were requested. Backups were made. Legal counsel was consulted, not to fight emotionally, but to prepare strategically. 2 weeks later, an offer arrived from a private developer, a generous bout again, but this time, the tone was different. The representative met Marcus personally. We admire what you've built, the man said smoothly. But redevelopment is inevitable. Why not step away gracefully? Marcus leaned back in his chair. And if I don't? The man's smile tightened. Progress has momentum. Marcus regarded him quietly. So does community. The man placed a folder on the desk. Consider the financial security. You could retire comfortably. Open something elsewhere. Fresh start. Marcus glanced at the number. It was substantial. More than he had ever held in savings. Samuel saw it too. For a moment, even the air seemed to hesitate. Because temptation, when framed as opportunity, can blur conviction. That night, Marcus walked home slower than usual. Evelyn waited by the kitchen window. They're offering comfort, she said gently after he explained. Yes. And what are they asking in return? He looked at her. Absence. She nodded. Then the price is too high. The next morning, Marcus called a meeting in the garage. All apprentices, all partners, even customers who wished to attend. He placed the be-out offer on the table. They want us gone, he said calmly. Murmurs filled the room, but they're offering more than we've ever had. Silence. Samuel looked at him carefully. What are you going to do? Marcus didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked to the garage entrance and looked out onto the street. He saw Clara helping a single mother carry groceries. He saw Aaron delivering parts with quiet efficiency. He saw Samuel teaching a younger apprentice how to balance a tire properly. He saw infrastructure. He turned back. I built this place because I was told I didn't belong elsewhere, he said quietly. And now they're offering comfort in exchange for the same thing. He paused. We are not refusing progress. He looked around the room steadily. We are refusing erasure. That was the line. Not shouted. Not dramatic. But final. They declined the offer. The next move came swiftly. A condemnation notice. The building was deemed structurally outdated. Inspection scheduled in 10 days. Now the pressure was direct. If declared unsafe, the garage could be forcibly closed. Samuel paced furiously. This is retaliation. Marcus remained seated, reviewing blueprints. Then we prepare. He hired An independent structural engineer, respected, meticulous, unaffiliated with the city. The engineer conducted a full review. Findings: minor roof reinforcement needed. Foundation stable. Electrical up to code. Marcus fixed the roof within 3 days. Inspection day arrived. The city official walked through the garage carefully. Clipboard in hand. He tested beams, examined wiring, reviewed permits. Samuel watched every movement. Marcus stood quietly beside him. Finally, the official closed his clipboard. The structure meets minimum safety requirements. Minimum, but sufficient. Outside, Samuel exhaled heavily. They're running out of angles. Marcus shook his head slightly. No, they're learning. The following month, something unexpected happened. The redevelopment proposal stalled. Funding delays. Investor hesitation. Public resistance. Growing louder. Because what began as a zoning notice had become a narrative. Local newspapers began printing op-eds about small business displacement. Churches organized forums. Even a few city council members began asking cautious questions. Ellington Auto Repair was no longer just defending itself. That had become the center of a broader conversation about ownership and belonging. One evening, as Marcus closed up, a familiar figure approached. Richard Calder, older now, more measured. He stood beside Marcus quietly. "You've made this difficult," Calder said. Marcus looked at him calmly. "Difficult for who?" Calder sighed. "The city doesn't like resistance." Marcus nodded. "Communities don't like replacement." Calder studied him for a long moment. "You could have walked away wealthy." Marcus met his eyes. "I already am." Calder frowned slightly. Marcus gestured toward the shop. "Wealth isn't always numbers." There was no hostility in his tone, just certainty. Calder looked around at the garage one last time. For the first time, there was no strategy in his eyes, only recognition. "You're not just protecting a business," he said quietly. "No," Marcus replied. "I'm protecting access." Calder gave a small nod. And walked away. Winter returned that year, but it felt different. The redevelopment plan was officially under review. Funding redirected elsewhere. Ellington Auto Repair remained standing, not because it fought loudly, but because it stood firmly. One night, long after everyone left, Marcus sat alone inside the garage. He ran his hand along the workbench, remembering the day he was fired, the day he thought survival was enough. He realized something then. They hadn't come for the building. They had come for the idea that a man denied entry could build his own door, the idea that success inside the rules was more powerful than rebellion outside them, the idea that infrastructure, once rooted in dignity, becomes difficult to uproot. Samuel entered quietly. "You still thinking?" he asked. Marcus smiled faintly. "Always." "You think they'll try again?" "Yes," Samuel nodded. "Good." Marcus raised an eyebrow. Samuel smiled. "Means we're still worth the effort." Marcus stood slowly. "Remember this," he said calmly. "When they come for the foundation, it means the structure matters." He turned off the lights. The garage doors closed, but this time, it wasn't winter pressing against them. It was history leaning forward, and Ellington Auto Repair was no longer just a place. It was proof. Spring of 1958 arrived not with blossoms, but with tension. The redevelopment plan had not disappeared. It had evolved. The city announced a revised proposal, a community-inclusive modernization initiative. The language was softer, the diagrams more detailed, the promises more polished. But buried deep within the revised zoning documents was a clause few noticed at first glance. Businesses allowed to remain would be required to comply with new commercial aesthetic standards. Translated plainly, renovate beyond financial reach or relocate. Marcus read the document 3 times. It wasn't demolition anymore. It was suffocation by compliance. Samuel paced across the garage floor. They couldn't Force us out directly, so now they're making survival too expensive. Marcus nodded calmly. Pressure feels different when it wears a tie. The required renovations included a redesigned storefront, exterior modernization, new signage regulations, and interior layout adjustments, changes that would cost more than the garage's annual profit. And the deadline was short. 90 days. This was no longer about legality. It was about endurance. The apprentices grew restless. Aaron worried openly. Even Clara, normally composed, admitted fear. They're trying to exhaust you, she said quietly one evening. Marcus stood in the doorway of the garage, watching twilight settle over Harlem. They're trying to outlast us. The next morning, instead of calling a contractor, Marcus did something unexpected. He walked to City Hall. Alone. No protest signs. No crowd. Just a folder under his arm. At the municipal office. He requested a meeting with the planning committee. Denied. He requested a formal review appointment. Delayed. He requested to submit documentation regarding economic impact. Deferred. Politeness can be a wall. So Marcus changed strategy. He did not shout. He documented. Over the next 2 weeks, he compiled something no one expected. Testimonials. Not emotional pleas. Structural evidence. He gathered statements from teachers explaining how reliable transportation kept classrooms staffed. Nurses describing emergency response times improved because of timely repairs. Delivery drivers calculating lost wages if relocation increased commute distance. Apprentices outlining how vocational skills prevented street involvement. He calculated numbers, projected job displacement. Community spending retention. Secondary business support. He built a case not for sentiment, but for economic logic. Then he did something even more strategic. He requested a public forum under city guidelines. If a certain number of residents signed a petition, the planning committee was obligated to hold one. Within 5 days, the required signatures were surpassed. Within 10, they doubled. Within 15, churches and neighborhood associations formally endorsed the review. Suddenly, the conversation wasn't about one garage. It was about inclusion in policy. The hearing was scheduled for April 14th, the night before. The garage was quiet. Samuel sat on an overturned crate. You nervous? He asked. Marcus wiped his hands slowly with a cloth. Yes. Samuel blinked. You? Marcus smiled faintly. Calm doesn't mean fearless. Outside, rain tapped lightly against the metal doors. Samuel hesitated. What if they don't listen? Marcus paused. Then we'll make them understand. The morning of the hearing, City Hall overflowed. Not with anger. With presence. Teachers. Mechanics. Shop owners. Families. Aaron sat in the front row. Clara held a folder thick with data. Even some Midtown clients had come quietly. Sitting near the back, the committee members entered, polished and procedural. The lead commissioner cleared his throat. We are here to review community concerns regarding commercial compliance standards. Marcus was called forward. He did not rush. He did not perform. He simply stood. Mr. Ellington, the commissioner began. You have 10 minutes. Marcus nodded. He opened his folder. But instead of reading immediately, he looked at the room. Then, at the panel. When I was dismissed from my previous employment, he began calmly, I was told I didn't fit the image. The room grew still. Was not disruptive. I was not negligent. I was simply inconvenient. He paused. This redevelopment plan is not about modernization. It is about image. A committee member shifted slightly. Marcus continued. You are not demolishing buildings. You are reclassifying belonging. A murmur rippled through the audience. He raised a hand slightly, not to silence them, but to steady the air. I am not asking for exemption from standards. He laid the documents out neatly. I am asking for proportional compliance. He walked the panel through financial projections. Cost to revenue ratios. Displacement impact. Tax contribution. Comparisons. He pointed to figures showing that Ellington Auto Repair generated stable tax revenue without requiring public subsidy. Then he delivered the turning point. Calmly. Precisely. If your objective is economic growth, then eliminating economically stable infrastructure contradicts your stated mission. Silence. He did not accuse. He did not shame. He simply aligned their logic against itself. Then he stepped back. The commissioner leaned forward. Mr. Ellington, modernization increases property value. Marcus nodded. So does stability. Another committee member interjected. Your building is outdated. Marcus met his eyes. So was I. A soft ripple of restrained laughter moved through the room, not mocking, but human. He continued. Modernization that displaces stability is not growth. It is substitution. He closed his folder. I am not asking you to protect my garage. I am asking you to define progress clearly. Then he sat down. The panel requested a recess. The room buzzed. Samuel leaned close. You hit them where it hurts. Marcus exhaled slowly. I hit them where it makes sense. After 45 minutes, the committee returned. The commissioner adjusted his papers. After reviewing the economic documentation provided and considering community impact statements, the planning committee proposes an amendment. The room leaned forward collectively. Existing small businesses demonstrating consistent economic contribution may apply for adaptive compliance exemptions, provided structural safety standards are maintained. Silence. Then realization. They had created a pathway, not just for Marcus, for others. The amendment required additional review, but the language was official. Marcus did not smile broadly. He simply nodded once, because this wasn't victory. It was acknowledgement. Outside City Hall, reporters approached. Mr. Ellington, how does it feel to win? He looked at them calmly. I didn't win, he said. The city listened. That distinction mattered, because what happened next was even more powerful. Over the following months, small businesses across Harlem began organizing documentation. Proactively, they learned the language of policy. They studied zoning codes. They prepared economic reports. Ellington Auto Repair became a model, not for resistance, but for literacy and power. One evening, as Marcus locked up, Samuel stood beside him. You changed the system, Samuel said quietly. Marcus shook his head. No. He looked at the glowing streetlights reflecting off the garage windows. I forced it to explain itself. Samuel considered that. And now? Marcus smiled faintly. Now we keep building. That winter, the garage facade remained modest. The paint slightly worn, the sign simple, but inside, something had shifted permanently. The apprentices were older. Now confident, capable. Samuel had begun mentoring on his own. Aaron's distribution business had expanded into 2 boroughs. Clara's workshops were being replicated in churches across Harlem. Infrastructure had multiplied. One night, years later, Marcus stood alone in the garage. The tools were quieter now, his hands slower. He ran his fingers along the workbench. The same wood from the early days. He remembered the firing, the inspection. The accusation, the buyout, the zoning notice, the zoning notice, the hearing. He realized something quietly profound. They never came for the garage because it was weak. They came because it worked. Evelyn entered softly. You ready? She asked. He nodded. They stepped outside together. Samuel locked the door behind them. The sign above the entrance read, Ellington Auto Repair, established 1954. It did not mention hearings or petitions or City Hall. It didn't need to, because legacy is not carved in headlines. It is embedded in continuity. Marcus looked down the street. One final time that night. Children were walking home from school. A delivery truck rolled past smoothly. A young mechanic waved from across the block. Foundation had held, not because it was indestructible, but because it was deliberate. And as the streetlights flickered on one by one, Harlem felt different. Not louder, not richer, but steadier, and sometimes that is the most powerful victory of all.